Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Racha Kudash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Revelation, the 6th chapter. And so at this point, right, John is still receiving these visions. As we went into the 5th chapter, John saw Yahushai, right? To sum it up, he saw Yahushai having the ability, right, and the power. As we get to the latter part of the chapter, he was the one who was able to go and receive the book, right, from the right hand of him that sat on the throne, which is the Most High. And so now having the book, he was able to begin to loose the seals, which he does here in Revelation, the 6th chapter. So you'll notice that each seal, right, on the book, it corresponds to, some time period, all right, or some event, which John, sees, right, as Yahushua opens those seals. And all these culminate together, right? As we start to go more and more into the book of Revelation, you'll see how, as the more and more seals are opened, more and more events happen, right? Getting to ultimately that 6th and 7th seal, which deal with the final destruction, right? The end of this age and the ushering in of the new one to come. So this is Revelation chapter 6, verse 1. And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard. Now keep in mind these events, right, and these things that take place as the seals are opened, they're not necessarily in chronological order, right? But they do signify things that must happen before all is said and done. Okay. So it says here, I saw the Lamb when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were, the noise of thunder, one of the 4 beasts saying, "Come and see." So he's describing the power and might in the voice of this beast, like thunder. And the beast tells him, "Come and see." So come and see, what is behind this seal, right? What it is that happens once this seal is opened. Now, the Lamb opening the seal, right? The Lamb represents Yahushai, who opened the seal. And what John saw after that seal was opened was a vision of, or at the time of Yahushai making his return. And that's what leading us into verse 2. And I saw, and behold, a white horse, which this white horse is signifying the means in which Yahushua is going to come, but it's also signifying the power and the purity of the Lord, right? Because dealing with white is a symbolic of being pure. You'll notice the scriptures mention, having on white robes, okay, which signifies purity. So that white horse that Yahushua is going to be on here signifies the purity, and the horse also signifies power. When you go to war, right, and they bring their horses, going back to how war was like in the ancient world, that is a show of force or authority or power. Okay, so the Lord is coming back, in great power and glory. And the scriptures say that in righteousness doth he judge and make war, and righteousness is aligned with purity. Now, at the same time that coming on a horse is a show of force, it is also a means of getting around. So this white horse that represents, the purity and the power of the Lord is also the chariots, because those are the vehicles or the means by which the angels and the Lord travel. Just like one who is on an actual horse, yeah, it signifies power, but it's also a means for them to get from point A to point B. So John is seeing these things, and he's describing what he is seeing, but what he is seeing is symbolic, or is a representation of, things that would actually happen. And he that sat on him had a bow. So the one who sat on the horse had a bow, okay, which the bow is a symbol of, might, right? A weapon or like military power, you could say, because when you deal with a bow is often used as a weapon of war. Okay. So the Lord is coming back in a chariot, and he's going to use that bow to do what? To conquer. Just like when somebody goes to war, you have horsemen, and then you have footmen, and you have chariotmen. Okay. And then you have some that use a spear, some that use a bow. These are weapons of war. And a crown was given unto him, which represents dominion. Now, as you read in other chapters, it mentions Yahushua having many crowns, because when he comes on the earth, he is going to take over. As it says, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. And what that looks like is the day when you read in 2nd Ezra 13, it gives you a more in-depth visual of Revelation 6 and 2. When the Lord makes his return with the angels and what the world calls UFOs, they'll look at it, the world will perceive it as an alien invasion. Okay, but that day will be the day in which the the Son of Man returns with the powers in heaven to conquer, that is to take over this earth and put it under his rule in righteousness. And similarly, as one who is on an actual horse, okay, that is say on horseback, actually shooting forth arrows from their bow, Yahushua is going to be in his chariot shooting forth lasers, right, from his chariot. And that's also in 2nd Ezra, the 13th chapter, verse 3. And when he had opened the second seal, so this is what John saw after the first seal, and that's why I mentioned that the things that John would see, right, the time periods and the things that would be happening within them, as the seals also signify, were not in chronological order, because the first seal he opened showed Yahushua's return, right, and his power to to conquer and take over. But that happens at the end. Verse 3, and when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, come and see. And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon. So here, the second seal that is loosed, that is open, shows forth a time period where this red horse signifies the power given to Esau Edom. All right, and he sits thereon. Okay, he has that time and that power, going back to the book of Job 9:24. And even in the name, right, the name that was given to Esau or Edom, Adawam in the Hebrew means red. So this other horse that John sees after the second seal has been opened signifies the dominion or the power of Esau. That is that red horse. And power was given to him that sat thereon, which is Esau, the Edomites, to take peace from the earth, that they should kill one another, and there was given unto him a great sword. Now, the thing about here is that Esau, we know, they came up, they usurped authority and power during the time period of the Greeks, right? The original Greeks and the original Romans were Japhetic people, but the Edomites made their way in there and ended up taking over. But when you actually look at the reign and the dominion that the Greeks had, yes, they did commit a lot of atrocities. Okay, they did do a lot of wickedness, and so did the Romans as well, but they also still ruled. And some might even argue that previous empires were worse, right? Some might argue that the Assyrians were more brutal in the way they ruled and more ruthless, right, than even, say, the Greeks or the Romans. But the Romans did have power and dominion. And to their latter part, that's where you had the Edomites in there, right, the pagan Roman Empire ruling. However, it isn't really until the beginning of their uninterrupted reign, right, when they come back as come back into power as the Europeans, going during the time of the Renaissance era, right, up until this time, that they fully assume their role, okay, and their power truly surpasses that of any previous empire. And that is when you see the true fulfillment of them having power to take peace from the earth. Because like I mentioned, the Roman Empire, when Esau was ruling as the Romans, yes, they did evil, but they also ruled, right? They ruled like an empire. And they cared about their people in the sense of their population and gaining control and staying in power. Esau Edom today is different, right? It's the same Edomites, but the mindset, they've now come on the scene embodying, as it was mentioned, the Apostle Paul mentioned about that in 2 Thessalonians, the 2nd chapter. Only he who letteth will let till he be taken out the way, and then the man of sin be revealed. When you go into that revelation, let's actually go there to 2 Thessalonians, right? That the man of sin be revealed. And let's go into the word. Well, let me read the verse first. Let no man deceive you by any means, because Paul was reassuring those in Thessalonica that Yahushai's return hadn't come yet. And there were certain events that would have to take place before Yahushai's return. So he mentions that you have to have the day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, right? The son of destruction. Now let's go into the word here, revealed. And it says here, to uncover, to lay open what has been veiled or covered up, to disclose, to make bare, to make known, to make manifest, right? To disclose what was known before. Now, the thing is, they knew who the Edomites were, right? They weren't oblivious to who the Edomites were. They knew who the Edomites were. Paul even mentioned that the mystery of iniquity is already at work, okay? But here it says, as he keeps on reading, he says here, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Now let's go down a bit to verse 7. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now letteth, when you go into the word letteth, is actually to hold back. Okay? And that's the Most High. So the Most High is holding them back, right? Only he who now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way. And let's go into that. Let's go into that word let. Okay, let's go into letteth, because it seems let is not in of its own here. But the word letteth here, it says to hold back, right? To detain, to restrain or hinder the course or progress of. So what was the progress that was being withheld here during the time when Paul was writing this? The progress was Esau Edom, though in power as the Roman Empire, was not in the fullness. They weren't in the peak of their power or their authority, right? They hadn't reached the full embodiment of the man of sin. Though they were doing wicked things, the wickedness of Esau today far outdo or surpass that of what they did as the Romans. But the Lord withheld, because during that time when they were the Romans, it wasn't time for them to fully embody what it means to be the man of sin just yet. They would have to go down, right? Have the dark ages and then come back again, and then continue that course of progress of becoming, right, of fully embodying that which would come by way of the technology they have now, the perverse spirit that is intensified within them. Okay, so we see here, right, that's when it says he that letteth, the word let is going into restrain, right, or to hold back until he be taken out of the way. Let's go into that word taken, which is not to destroy, but rather the opposite, right? So the Lord is holding back until the time when he deems it ready for Esau Edom to come into existence, not in the sense of Esau didn't exist before, but for them to come in existence as the man of sin, right? It says here to appear in history, to come upon the stage, because there was a period in time. See, Esau ruled, as different people, right? As the Greeks, as the Romans, but there was a period in time when they had to come on the stage, come on the scene as the man of sin, fully embodying that. Okay. And so when you go back to the book of Revelation, the 6th chapter, dealing with the red horse, the time when their full mindset is on actually taking, if you look at how the Esau Edom is ruling in this time, it's not even just about having an empire, right? It's not about like how the Romans ruled. No, this time they're actually deliberately, their mindset is to take peace from the earth. Okay, it's just full on destruction. All right, eating flesh, creating chemtrails. Like if you look at the things, the track record of what Esau has done in this time with their elites, it's not even about furthering, or growing an empire. It's about destroying. They put chemicals in the sky, right? The chemtrails they spray, the foods that you eat, the wars that they started. They orchestrated World War One. They orchestrated World War Two. They pushed diseases out in the world. All right, everything that they've pushed, if you look at it, takes peace from the earth. Everybody is miserable. People are more miserable now than they were back during the time when the Romans ruled, during the time when the Greeks ruled. Okay, so there was even though Esau had a dominion on the earth, there was a specific period or point in time when that red horse, they would fully symbolize or embody that red horse, right? When they were given that full go ahead to have that power, as it says, which is through their technology now, to fully take peace from the earth. And that's what they're doing. That's why the Lord has to stop them in this time. Because if not, none of us are going to make it. Okay? And the list goes on and on and on in terms of examples of them taking peace from the earth. The whole world is crying out against them. That they should not, that they should kill one another, which is going into their wars. And you can go and when you look at a lot of the wars they have, a good portion of them are also with other Edomites. It's just that they're not unified under the nationality of Edom. They'll call themselves, British, Russian, American, certain European, countries, but they're all Edomites, all right, for the most part. And all throughout history, you see them going right back and forth, back against each other, even when America was being established. All right, fighting against the French, the British, the Spanish. It was them amongst each other, fighting against each other. That little horn was of Esau. Okay, so it says here, and there was given unto him a great sword, which is going into their military. All right, which now they've infused or they've advanced through technology. But if you look at how they've been able to have power, right? When you look at how Esau has come up into power, how is he taking the things that he wants? How is he pushing his agenda and taking peace from the earth? Is through force. But why do people fear him? The scriptures tell you, right? In Revelation 13, I believe it's 13, it mentions they wondered who can make war with the beast. And we know that Esau through Babylon is spearheading that, because the beast is just another form in which Esau's power, the shape in which it is taken today, because they're the ones who are empowering it anyway. The beast is in the power structure of Elam. So it is through that sword, which was a blessing, right? Going back to the blessing that Isaac gave them, by the sword, by thy sword shalt thou live. So John, when the second seal was opened, this is what John saw. All right, this period in time where Esau, Edom, which is the one that's sitting upon the red horse, and that red horse being his power, has been given that power and authority. See, now they're talking about Yuval Noah Harari will come on the scene and talk about humans being hackable creatures. They want to completely do away with the Most High and basically embed within you themselves as God. None of these things are to bring about peace. Look at the actual earth. Look at what they've done in the water and on the land and in the air. Everything is suffering. Animals having Down syndrome, mental defects. Bro, what are you doing? They say you can't even eat real food anymore. We're going to print lab grown meat for you. You have that. So it's just a whole lot. But John saw this. And this is something that had to happen before the end, right? This is one of the sequence of events in time that the Lord had prepared that will take place after the commencing of Yahushua coming on the earth to set it all off, right? And then beginning to loose the seals. Verse 5, it says, "And when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, Come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse." So he opens the third seal. Remember, there were 7 of them, right? So now he opens the third seal, and he sees, as he said, the third beast calls him and says, Come and see. And this time he sees a black horse. And he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And the black horse signifies, once again, a time period of judgment. Okay? Mainly, judgment in general, but also mainly judgment in particular against Israel. And darkness, or black, is synonymous with darkness, which is not associated with a good time, but a bad time. Okay? Which involves us falling away, right? Us being led into captivity, into slavery, which that's a part of the judgments that we had to go through. And so, as it says, and he that sat on him, meaning the one that had the power to bring this upon us, had a pair of balances in his hand. And when you go into the word balances, it deals with that, right? It deals with judgment, slavery. Because really, slavery is a form of judgment. But anyway, the word there, zugos, it says a yoke, right? A yoke that is put on drought cattle, a metaphor used of any burden or bondage as that of slavery. And it also mentions a balance, a pair of scales. Okay, and we know that a balance is associated with judgment. When you go back during the time of Daniel, the 5th chapter, what was said to Belshazzar? Was it not said to him that thou art weighed and thou art found wanting? Let's read that. Daniel 5. Oops. Okay. Daniel 5, and getting to the end. Yeah, there you go. Daniel 5 and 27, or 5 and 26. This is the interpretation of the thing. Many, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tycho, thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. So what did that mean? Because he was found wanting, he came up short, he was lacking, he was going to be judged, right? When you're weighed, you're judged. Okay, and he was found, or as this kingdom was found, that time is up. All right, time for you to be judged. So going back to Revelation, the 6th chapter, that's what the pair of balances represent. Judgment. And a part of that judgment was slavery coming upon us. And that was also mentioned and prophesied. Now, you see how these you see how these all tie back in? When you go back to the 5th chapter, all these seals were on the same book. And the book represented the scriptures, right? The mysteries, the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, and the visions. It tells you in the Old Testament, right, in Isaiah and Daniel, that all the vision has become as a book that is sealed. So now, as Yahushua is loosing these seals, these visions that were seen of old, that were not understood, not only do we have the understanding of them, but now they can actually start to come to pass. Okay? So Esau coming up into power, that was seen of old, because a part of the visions that were received of the prophets of old included the actions and the consequences and the results of Esau being in power. So by default, a part of the visions included Esau coming up into power. Well, guess what? When Yahushua loosed that second seal, that's what John saw. Right? The power for Esau to do these things, to be the sword of the Lord. The first seal he loosed, he saw Yahushua's return. That was also seen of the prophets of old. That links up with Isaiah 63, Isaiah 66, many other precepts in visions that the prophets of old saw. So all these, events or time periods that are taking place, or that will as Yahushua loosed those seals, really one way or another, they go back to those visions that were sealed. All right. Was it not seen in Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, and even mentioned to us that we would go into slavery, would go into captivity? Guess what? John saw that. So, so going back to Revelation 6 and 5, going into 6, right? That black horse represents that time of judgment and slavery that came upon us. Verse 6, and I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts. Now, once again, it's a time period, right? So within this time period, you had us in a dark state, because slavery wasn't a one-day thing, right? It was a series of events. Not only were we captured, put on slave ships, submitted to harsh conditions, this was all a dark time for us. And then put on plantations. That wasn't overnight. That wasn't a 2-week thing. This is continuous for a period of time. Okay, where we were undergoing harsh judgment. Verse 6, and I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, so John is saying, now when I saw this, now I heard a voice that said, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny. See thou hurt not the oil and the wine. And let's go into that. The penny over here, okay, to see how much that actually is. So it says here, right, a measure. Let's go into that word measure. A dry measure containing 4 codelae or 2 ceteri, less than our quart or 1 liter, as much as would support a man of moderate appetite for a day. So this is about a measure, which is how much you could, would sustain you for one day. And it's saying a measure of wheat for how much though, right? This is like saying enough food to sustain you for one day. And for how much would you have to pay for that? A penny, right, containing 10, a Roman silver coin in the New Testament time. It took its name from it being equal to 10 asses. A number that's a number after 217 BC increased to 16. It was the principal silver coin of the Roman Empire. From the parable of the laborers in the vineyard, it would seem that a denarius was then the ordinary pay for a day's wages. So let's translate that into our time now. When you go out to eat, if you were to buy food that could sustain you for one day, and you had to spend a day's wages, a day, if minimum wage, let's find out what's minimum wage, and let's just take New York for example. $17 an hour, right? And let's say that how long does the average person work? How long does the average, let's say 9 to 5, right? Person work in New York a day. Okay, about 8 hours a day. So let's say we multiply that, right? We say 17 times 8. That's about $136. Okay? Imagine spending your day's wages on enough food just to feed you for one day. Okay, so this is if you're making minimum wage. What does that signal to you? If that's happening, like you go out and you like, yo, hold on, why am I spending? I'm not talking about buying something, food that's gonna last me, for a week or two. You buy enough groceries to where you can make food for enough for a week. This is for a day. You got to spend a day's paycheck to be able to sustain yourself for one day. That's what you would call today hyperinflation. Okay, where prices of things are going high, and that signals a hard time, because now it's difficult. Like people today, they're not even living paycheck to paycheck. That has passed them. At first, you were about 2 to 3 paychecks away from being broke, from being homeless. And then it went to you're literally 0 paychecks away from being homeless. If you miss a paycheck, your ass might be on a chopping block. Now It's not even that if you miss a paycheck, your ass is already on, you behind. Okay? What has changed? Not your wages, but the value of your currency is going down. But nonetheless, when you have this in a society where prices of things start to go up and it becomes harder and harder to afford things, it starts to create food insecurities, okay, which bring, once again, difficult times, right? That's a form of judgment because people start to suffer. They don't have enough to eat. Then they start resorting to what? Alternative means. So that's also, characterized within this time, right? That was shown after the seal was loosed. And as it says, 3 measures of barley for a penny, see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. Meaning that, in these times where times are tough, right? Things are harsh. Eventually, people start to take matters into their own hands. You're going to have a lot going on. However, what's going to be preserved when it mentions not the hurt not the oil and the wine, that is symbolizing the truth, okay, the knowledge and wisdom and understanding, that regardless of what's going on, that is going to be preserved. Regardless of how bad things get out here, that knowledge is going to be preserved and as it says, not hurt. That's why we still have access to it to today. Now, the majority of the world eventually is about to lose access to it once the Lord brings in a famine of the word to where it's not being preached anymore. But the knowledge had to be preserved. So really, when you also look throughout history, there were a lot of attempts to hide the truth, to hide the correct understanding that we have today. But as it was commanded that it should not be hurt, we still have it. So these elites here, they start losing their minds. They're bugging out because they're wondering, we manipulated information, we as it were changed history, we taught and indoctrinated them lies, we did all these different things to, like you would say, hurt the oil, hurt the truth, hurt the wine, that they wouldn't have access to it, to know who they were, to know the names of their God. How do they know this? What business do people who came on slave ships, who were brought to the point of not being able to read and write, have knowing Hebrew, knowing what the world would call esoteric knowledge, because it wasn't widely known to a lot of people? That was because it was all set up, through the Spirit. It was divinely set up by the Lord. Verse 7, and when he had opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th beast say, come and see. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse. And the pale horse represents a time of destruction. And it's going to describe the things, right, or the traits or attributes that are associated with the pale horse. That's how you know it's dealing with the time of destruction. We otherwise know it as the time of Jacob's trouble, because that's when you're going to see a lot of these things in kicking into full gear. These things being the sword, hunger, death. So it says here, behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. Because when you die, the hell here is referring to the grave. Death and hell are tied at the hip. When you die, you go into the grave. That's just basically how it is. Okay. So it mentions here, it says, and death and hell followed with him. This is not literal in the sense that, death is not riding on an actual horse, right? But it is it is saying here that this time period was dominated by death and hell, which means there's going to be a whole lot of death and hell, or synonymous with each other, people going to the grave. And power was given unto them over the 4th part of the earth, right, which is a portion of the earth. And this is mainly going to be associated here with Babylon, because it's not going to be exclusive to Babylon, but it's going to be primarily affecting Babylon. Death and hell are going to have power and dominion heavily here in Babylon, as the Lord starts to, unleash more and more of the judgment related prophecies on the earth. Other places of the earth are going to feel it too. But this is going to be the hottest part, you could say. And then eventually it'll become literally the hottest part. It says here to kill with the sword or to kill with sword. So death has the power and the tools that death uses. I'm personifying death here, right? But the tools that death uses to have power are the sword, hunger, because the sword, whether it's an actual physical sword or a modern day weapon, can be used to bring you to what? Death. You can't escape death with the sword, right? The sword brings you to death. Same with hunger. You can be slain or put to death or brought into the power of death or under the power of death with hunger, famine, not eating. That's what he says, starving to death. With death, which is just this here is just in reference to other means by which you can be brought under the power of death. You don't have to starve to death, and you may not be shot or you may not be stabbed. But you could be killed by a wild animal. A tree could fall on you. You could be hit by a car. You could fall off a high point and die. And with the beasts of the earth, right? Wild animals. So this time where John saw after, I believe it was the fourth seal was opened, was a time of just complete chaos and destruction and a lot of death. That's why it was characterized or symbolized as death having power in this time, using many means and tools over certain portions of the earth, primarily here in America, okay, using the sword, using hunger, using other means, wild animals, in order to bring forth that reign of death. And that's gonna ultimately be commissioned by the Most High as a time of great judgment, a time like never before. Verse 9, and when he had opened the fifth seal. Now, once again, is this not tied to the visions? How many precepts can you go to in reference in the Old Testament of things that were seen by the prophets of old that ultimately, Jeremiah 30, right? Jeremiah 30 and 7, we go into that all the time. Daniel 12 and 1, we go into that all the time. Why did Jeremiah say that day is great so that none is like it? Because there's going to be a lot of destruction, but also deliverance. Verse 9, and when he had opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God. These are the believers, right? Those that were martyred for standing firm for their faith in Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, and for the testimony which they held. So remember that in the heavens, because in other chapters in the book of Revelation, it'll start to give you a bit more of a visual where you have like an altar right over there in the heavens. I believe Revelation 8, the 8th chapter goes into that. So John says, the fifth seal is open, and now he sees under the altar the souls of those that had died for the Lord. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, how long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? So he's seeing the time when you have a lot of believers, right, that were being martyred, that were dying for the Lord. Now, remember that going back, we went into the history of this in Revelation, the first chapter, and I believe the second as well, that even during the time of the Apostle John and shortly after he died, there was a great persecution for centuries, okay, up all the way into the second century AD against the believers in Yahushua. And a lot of people died for that. But likewise, in our time, you're going to have some that are going to be put to death for the testimony that they hold of Yahushua. And so John is seeing all these spirits crying to the Father, basically seeking, the Lord to act, to bring judgment, to finally, correct the earth, that this wickedness would cease. And white robes were given unto every one of them. Why? Because those that died in Yahushua, they're good. Okay, why did the Apostle Paul mention that from henceforth there's a crown laid up for him? Because he knew that he was going to die for the Lord, but he had died in faithfulness to the Lord. Hence, he's already good. He's going to receive that crown, right? And the scriptures mention many being made pure. That's by way of suffering for the Lord, maintaining your faith even until death. And I will give thee a crown of life. So those white robes symbolize the purity. All right, because having died for the Lord, they were made pure and have obtained, okay, their spot, be it whatever time period it's in. If you obtain a spot, right, and you died being a martyr, going back to the let's say the 1st or 2nd century AD, your spot is still reserved, even though you may have to come back onto earth again and live, in different incarnations, even up into these last days. Once your spot is reserved, your spot was already reserved from the foundation of the world. So what that means is, yes, you'll still have to labor for the Lord and suffer for the Lord in this time, but no matter what, you're not going to be one of those who turns your back on the Lord. Because if you had a crown back then, you're going to have that crown now. If you're of the elect is time agnostic. The elect will always be the elect in their generations. They may not always be perfect in actions, but their spirit will always be without guile before the Lord. Okay? So it says here, white robes were given unto every one of them, and it was said unto them that they should rest yet for a little while, or a little season, because that's what happens, right? When you're in the spirit world, you rest, you're at peace. So it was said, basically, just wait, just hold on a little longer until their fellow servants also and their brethren that should be killed as they were should be fulfilled. So there's a certain number that the Lord has of men that will, or believers that will have to lose their lives for his sake. But once, let's say the first 2-3 people who have died in the Lord, they're in the spirit world, but they have to wait, okay, until everything else is fulfilled. They have to wait until those that remain, that have to glorify the Lord in their death, also have to, they have to do that. They have to accomplish that. Because those that have died and passed on, they can rest and their works do follow them. But the rest of us are still working. Verse 12, and I beheld. So what John saw in to sum it up under that 5th seal was those that had died for Yahushua, but also that there are some of us that are going to have to die for the Lord in this time, right, to be martyrs. But know and rest assured that we will also be given those white robes. Verse 12, and I beheld when he had opened the 6th seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, because now there's 7 seals, right? We've the Lord is described, and these the things that were described as happening in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th seal. These are high points. Like, these are points that were highlighted throughout the time of history, you could say, of things that would occur. They're not the only things, and it's not exclusive to them, but they're like big high umbrellas. Because if you go to the 1st seal with the one being on a white horse and coming with power and conquering, the things under that you don't see, but is still covered under this umbrella, are being delivered, right? Being beamed up. The events you see in Matthew 24 proceeding up to the Lord's return, the World War III and all those, that has to happen for Yahushua to make his return. He's going to make his return in the midst of that. Right? Esau, Edom, right? Having the power to take peace from the earth. Guess what? Prophecies about martial law and all the other granular prophecies of the things Esau would do, that would be by his hand, the hour of temptation and all of that, that falls under that. Because once they're given this power in this position, the forcing, all right, of the mark of the beast, or the institution of martial law, or all these other things they do, are a byproduct of that. Okay, so even though it doesn't mention every single thing that would happen, these are main events, or like big umbrellas in which underneath which any other prophecies fit within. So going down to verse 12, it says, "And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake." So now as you get to the sixth and the seventh, here is describing the time of destruction, right? Because when all is said and done, this place is going to go out through fire, that second death. And so that earthquake, as it says here, that he saw, represents, the time of destruction. It represents destruction. And you're going to have actual earthquakes happening right around this time. Yahushua prophesied about that. You're going to have signs in the heavens happening around this time. Yahushua prophesied about that. And these are all going to lead up to the final destruction, which is going to be by way of World War III. All right, with these nations, and as you can see, they're gearing up for it now. And as the war intensifies, they're going to use those weapons that are considered the weapons of the Lord's indignation, i.e., those missiles that can do a lot of damage. And those missiles can also cause earthquakes. All right. So basically, under this sixth seal, he saw the time period of the latter days of the end, where you would have the signs in the earth, signs in the heavens, leading up to the destruction of different parts of the earth through the nuclear missiles. So, as he says here, "And the sun became black as sackcloth of hair." It's not that the sun, put on sackcloth on itself, all right, but it's just symbolizing here, just like the hair of the animal's skin that was used for sackcloth was dark. He's using that as a description to highlight the sun becoming dark, and the moon became as blood. These are signs, right? These are signs that will be taking place in the end times, right before this destruction, and we're seeing that now. Because although you will have, the skies being darkened, okay, through all the things that are going to be in the air, chariots flying, missiles flying, different aircrafts flying and casting a shadow upon the earth, missiles are not going to turn the moon to blood, right? And when it says the moon became as blood, it doesn't mean literally that the moon turns to blood. It's what you call today a blood moon. And missiles don't create blood moons. Okay, these are signs in the heavens that the Lord said would happen. So you have your solar eclipses, right? You have your blood moons. These are all signs and events that would take place before that day of the Lord, which consists of the actual destruction. So a precept for this is, let's go to the book of Joel, the second chapter. And I'll jump around for a couple of verses here. This is Joel chapter 2, verse 10. "The earth shall quake before them, the heavens shall tremble, the sun and the moon shall be dark," right? That's your, "and the stars shall withdraw their shining," which is also going into the time of judgment and destruction. So you have lunar eclipse, you have solar eclipse, you have, like I mentioned, the clouds from destruction also, creating casting a shadow on the earth. So, and some of them, sometimes when you look at war and there's explosions and smoke and, things are just that chaotic, it gets dark. It gets dark. Like sometimes the smoke is so thick, it blocks out the rays of the sun. So now let's jump down from verse 10 to verse 30, right? "The day of the Lord. And I will shew wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire, and pillars of smoke." Verse 31, "The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord come." So you notice, right, in the time period that John is seeing here, where after the sixth seal is opened, the things that are taking place, you have the signs in the earth, right, the signs in the heaven, and then it leads into verse 13, right, as it says here, "And the stars of heaven fell onto the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs, when she is shaken of a mighty wind." So this is what John is seeing, but what it symbolizes here are the missiles, okay, the nuclear missiles, the different projectiles in the heavens that are dropping, and this has an effect on everything, okay? Because imagine if you look up here, let's take a look at this. What is this? Revelation 6 and 13. Revelation 6 and 13. Fig tree. Sometimes they have an illustration of it, but let's see. Fig tree blown of a mighty wind. So hoping somebody would take the scripture and try to give us a nice visual of it. But okay, I guess this is just an example, right? And I remember this because we grew up in Ghana, right? My brother and I, and so we had trees. Like our dad had like trees, different fruits and stuff like that. And usually on days when it would be very windy, whether it's mangoes or guava or oranges, you would come there and you'd see a lot of them on the ground, right? And sometimes while you're there, as the wind is blowing, very vehemently, you'll see just like as the stem of these trees are bent, the wind blows so hard that it moves the trees in one direction, it moves in another direction, and sometimes as they're swayed, you'll see the actual fruit of the tree start to fall. All of them start to fall, almost like they're raining down, because of the force that the wind is using to push them. And so John is seeing here what look like stars falling from the sky down, but it looks like they're raining down, like if a fig tree was blown with like a strong wind, and that symbolizing the destruction. But what's also going to be happening, right, as this destruction is occurring? Those that are in high positions that are likened onto being stars, okay, or celebrities or people looked at in high positions, the powers of heaven. All right, the scriptures also say that they're going to be shaken because their kingdom is going to be going down. Because at the point of this nuclear destruction, that is also the ending of their kingdom. So as physically their kingdom is crumbling, their state, all right, of being in a high position, of being in a heaven, right, that lofty state of rulership they're going to be brought down from that. Immediately, they're going to go from calling the shots, pulling the strings, to pulling the shackles from their ankles and their hands. Okay, so as you're going to have these missiles hitting, which is going to be the destruction of Esau's kingdom, it's also going to be the downfall of these elites, of those in these high positions that are being brought down. So it all goes hand in hand. Verse 14, and the heaven departed. So you see how these are all describing, the things that are happening, right? You have the signs in the earth, the signs in the heavens. You have the missiles hitting, and then you have the result being what you have in verse 14, which is describing a mushroom cloud, right? Or mushroom clouds. That's what it means by the heavens departing as a scroll, right? It's talking about, because he's seeing, when you see these explosions, some of these mushroom clouds can go really, really, really tall. Okay, where you look up and you see, and it looks like a scroll that, as he says here, when it's rolled together. And every mountain and island were moved out of their places, because you're going to have certain islands that are not going to be there anymore. Some of them are going to be destroyed. Some of them are going to be broken up by the not only the earthquakes, but also the force or the impact. These missiles are powerful. So the impact of them hitting different parts of the earth, it tells you in the book of Isaiah that is going to cause the earth to reel to and fro, to stagger like a drunk person. Like somebody that's drunk, they can't walk straight. They'll start leaning a bit to the left, then they'll start stepping a bit to the right. And that's how it's going to feel as the force of these missiles are hitting different parts of the world. Now, one missile may not shake the planet, but a continuous barrage of them will eventually shake it. So let's look here at the heavens departed as a scroll, right? Let's say mushroom cloud. There you go. And these are all different examples, right? When you look at this, John is describing this because the first thing that comes to his mind is like, yo, this looks like, look at this. Right? He's like, yo, this looks like a scroll that's rolled, and that's why he specifically mentioned rolled together, right? Scroll rolled together. Right, and that's when it's like this, right? It's rolled up and it's bound in the middle, so you can see it's like it flares out a bit on either the bottom or the top. And so if you were to take that, like I just showed here, and to stand it up, this is why if you were to take this and put it sideways, it kind of looks like that. Okay, that's where you have what you call your mushroom clouds. Verse 15, and the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every freeman, hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains. And the kings of the earth are dealing with those in the highest positions, right? Starting with your different elites, all right, and also your different rulers, okay, because it's not just Edomites that are that are going to be on the earth when this happens. Right, but they're going to be the primary ones that are heavily affected because their kingdom is going down. Right, so it says them, the kings, right, the rulers, the great men, those in known in this world as men of renown, having high status, being rich, right, the rich men, the chief captains, which goes into your military commanders and generals, and the mighty men, right, even the men of war. It says, and then you have the category of every bondman, right? Your slave men, slaves, those that are imprisoned, and every free man, right? Your average common folk, hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains. The difference here is that those that are the mighty men and the rich and those that are high up, their dens and rocks, these are like specific either mountain retreats, underground bunkers, areas that are in their minds built to withstand this kind of war. For the average individual, you're gonna be seeing them running into buildings, running into nearest fallout shelters, which is not really gonna do anything for you. But in other words, he's seeing everybody scrambling every which way. Except you, if you're an average man, nobody's letting you into the same kind of bunker as as Jacob Rothschild. So you take the best you can get, but everybody's going to try to hide themselves, running into buildings, running into places, right? Because that's what these buildings look like. They look like caves or dens. Okay, if you were to look from afar, what you'd see is these buildings, and then you see the tiny openings, like your doors, right, your gates, and people just running into it. It says, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. Now, they're not actually going to be talking to rocks and mountains. What this is capturing is the intention, which is we're running into these bunkers and these hiding places to hide and expecting them to protect us and shield us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, which is the judgment from the Lord. He that sitteth on the throne is the Most High, and from the wrath of the Lamb. And the wrath of the Lamb is Yahushai. Did he not mention, it says that, I believe in Isaiah, right, the day of vengeance burns in his heart, and the year of his redeemed is coming. Isaiah 42 talks about how he is long time holding his peace, right, and he shall roar for the great day of his wrath. So the wrath of the Lord, when he returns, is going to be in the midst of this destruction from the missiles, but he's also going to be unleashing those laser beams from his chariot and helping in the destruction here as well. And they're going to be trying to hide from that as well. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? So these things John saw, right, as these seals were being opened. But you notice he saw them after each seal was opened. So while the seals were still, covered, these which were seen in times past in the Old Testament by the prophets of old as visions, they were all sealed up, right? They weren't coming to pass. But after Yahushua did what he did, that commenced, okay, now, the Lord, Yahushua has come on the scene, all right? He has done what he has done. So now we have a way, okay, to gain salvation, right? The elect have a way back to the Father, because it was all part of the Lord's plan. Israel, he delivers his people. They go astray. He sends Yahushua back. Yahushua comes to set things in motion, and that's why his time began the last days. And then all the other things that the Lord has planned for that period of the last days, which now we are in the latter of the last days, started to then take place. But it had to begin somewhere. And that brings us to the end of the book of Revelation, the 6th chapter. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.